Good day. My name's Carter Terenzini. I'm the Town Administrator for Templeton, and the show you're about to watch for the next hour is called Talk of the Town. It's an opportunity for us to introduce department heads to you and talk about issues of the day that may be of concern or just general interest. Today I have with me Adam Lamontagne. You've probably heard his name quite a bit over the last 6-8 months, and you've heard his title, Municipal Management Fellow. We'll talk about what that is in just a few moments, but it's occurred to me, as Adam has actually just finished preparing to tape his first show, that we haven't really taken the time to introduce him to the community at large. So, he can be a bit of a talkative fellow, but that's what we're going to do right now. Hi, Adam.
Hi, Carter. Thank you for the opportunity to sit here with you tonight. I mean, we spend a lot of time in the office working on various projects and procurement, you name it. We work on it. Budget, a lot of good times. But I'm Adam Lamontagne. I'm the Municipal Management Fellow. I have the opportunity to work for the town of Templeton, thanks to Mr. Terenzini as Town Administrator, appointing me and being confirmed by the Board of Selectmen here in Templeton. A little bit about me. I'm from the city of Chicopee, where I served nearly 10 years in municipal government, starting from the Chicopee School Committee when I was about a little over 20 years old, to 6 years there, 3 terms, and then I ran for city council and served nearly 2 terms there. I have almost 10 years of experience on those positions, and then I left for a brief amount of time to, with the encouragement of the mayor as well as the chief of police, to go to the police department for a very short amount of time. And then I continued on and went for my MPA, and I left that to then pursue my master's.
Okay, so here's the guardian rule of when we're chatting with folks. You just committed one of my cardinal sins. You just used a set of initials without necessarily telling people what they are. So, MPA, what's that mean to me out in the real world?
Yes, you are correct. Carter and I have many discussions on the MPA.
Well, just so that they know what it is.
The MPA is a Master's of Public Administration.
Okay. And so that is, you earned that at Westfield State College?
Westfield State University, where I also was awarded my bachelor's degree in 2014. I continued on and received my Master's of Public Administration from Westfield State University this past May. Carter and I do have discussions on the MPA versus what he has of an MBA, which is a Master's of Business Administration.
Well, the important thing that I want to try to make sure in all of our conversations with the public is that we're getting out what that is. So that's that Master's of Public Administration. So what we were looking for when we hired Adam, I want to back up with you for a little bit.
Okay.
The town administrator had been advertised, and the University of Massachusetts Collins Center helped the Board of Selectmen recruit. And in 2 recruitments, they were unable to find a town administrator that they felt met their needs. A lot of this has to do with the marketplace. There are not as many people entering this profession, simply not a great deal of interest in it, quite frankly. So you have a lot of folks my age leaving, retiring, and not a lot of new folks coming in. In addition, at the time of recruitment, the town's reputation was not as good as a lot of candidates would have wanted. So the solution that the Select Board agreed upon was to recruit and retain someone such as Adam, Master's in Public Administration, some experience in the public sector, who would work for 1 year. And during that year, display a mastery of a set of competencies. Do they understand the open meeting law? Do they understand the public bidding law? Do they understand collective bargaining? A series of things which the board has outlined. And upon the conclusion of 1 year, which will be coming up mid-September here, If the board is satisfied that Adam has made the kinds of progress they envisioned, he will become the assistant town administrator. My pay will be cut, my hours will be cut, and the pay that had been coming to me will be coming over to Adam. And then 1 year later, assuming that the progress continues to go as planned and as hoped, Adam would become the town administrator. So that's why we have this position of municipal management fellow and how that works out. So, Adam, I want to go back to last summer when you first came into the office and I asked you a few questions. So you've been on the city council, you've been on the school committee, and while those are very important positions, they are not chief executive officer positions. They're not administrative positions. They're where you are one of 8 voices or 11 voices or such. And you weigh in and you cast your vote. But at the end of the day, you're not necessarily responsible for the day-to-day administration. So why does someone leave that important but not as responsible position to be in a chair where everything that goes wrong is your fault?
Accountability. Remember what you said to me when I first, what makes you want to go from that life to the accountable life?
Yep.
And it's really my drive for the public good, focusing on projects, working collaboratively with the multiple boards, committees, commissions that we have here in Templeton, but additionally working under the direction of the Board of Selectmen. I've learned a lot from Mr. Terenzini, from collective bargaining that he just mentioned to procurement. I went through my training successfully with the Inspector General's office, where I received my certification to do just that. And I was grateful for Mr. Terenzini signing off on giving me some authority when it comes to procurement here in Templeton. But this position is one that was just mentioned earlier by Mr. Terenzini that a lot of people aren't going into. It's certainly, I could tell you, out of the field, the people that graduated with the Masters of Public Administration, my colleagues there, nearly just 2 out of all the graduates are going into municipal management. It's certainly a challenging field, especially with the municipal budget constraints placed upon us, and that actually was my capstone. I wrote about Massachusetts municipal budget constraints here in the state, and this is something that we worked on, and I've learned a tremendous amount of budgetary skills drafting a budget, because I've never drafted a budget before. This was my first time, long hours, not quite 70 hours a week, but close to it. If you include driving times, it was over that.
I chuckle because every once in a while Adam will comment upon, put a lot of hours in that week, and I'll point out that it hasn't hit the 70 hours per week mark yet that I'd told him can happen during the town meeting season. So town meeting, in terms of the budget, town meeting was something very new for you as well. And what did you think? What was your reaction to it?
Town meeting is interesting because it's I would consider it the most direct form of democracy, purest form. I mean, everybody in town has the right to participate, vote, question, and partake. I mean, where it's different from a city council form of government because they have the authority to, the mayor submits to the city council in a city, and it's generally, I mean, it's approved. And here in town meeting, not only does it have to go through be endorsed or recommended by the select board advisory committee, then go to town meeting. There's a lengthier process, and sometimes it seems like it takes some time to get some things because you have to wait for town meeting before we could get moving forward on certain projects. And sometimes, I'll tell you, there's a couple of votes there where I was concerned that the item could have been shot down because we spend a lot, there's a lot of legwork that goes into any item that you may see at town meeting. I don't think people understand how many hours we spend on the various items, like the Stone Bridge study, for example, how much time we spent putting in all the work for that, and all the other various important items that come up That was my take on it.
So
for
the
most part.
budget was probably your first major project that you tackled for us. What would you say was the key thing that you learned? And you had a lot of, I'm not going to say hand-holding, but a lot of back and forth with the department heads, making sure the spreadsheets came in right, all the backup material. What would you say was the most critical thing that you learned in that process that you weren't aware of ahead of time?
I would say attention to detail and making sure the budget numbers all line up and are in the appropriate places.
You were a little nervous that last Sunday when I called you and said a couple numbers didn't line up. I will acknowledge that. I didn't speak with him on the phone, but I could sense the nervousness in the texts coming back and forth. And so we got through that in March, and the Inspector General's office. If you start to see that Adam is losing some hair, it could be because of the complexity of Mass General Law, Chapter 30B. We did just designate you so that you could formally issue documents, not sign the contracts or change orders, but to actually formally prepare documents. What would you talk with people about and make sure they understand about Chapter 30B and construction projects that we have to go through?
We'll see Chapter 30B and have different sections like 39M, supplies and services, and there's different tier levels at each one. It's important to always, whether you're a department head, to work with our office, making sure that everything gets done and submitted in the proper area, whether it has to be advertised in the Gardner News, has to be placed, invitation for bid. There's a whole process that needs to take place, but you also need to put them in, advertised 2 weeks before. Some certain items have to be done that way. It's hard to explain because you have different criteria for different tiers, and you have to make sure that construction lines up with construction, with prevailing wages for construction. There's different standards for each. Let's say I just finished a road reclamation invitation for bid, and that has to be pre-qualified. And there's a process where all bidders, that you need to submit the value amount and make sure that they all line up with the pre-qualification, whether they meet the bid deposit, and all those various, it's a lot of attention to detail on that, as well as the budget. That's basically the best way to sum it up.
Would you say it's one of the most time-consuming tasks in the office?
I would say so, especially if you don't get a scope of services or scope of work that you're actually going out for.
One of the things that he's describing is that it sounds easy. Mass General Law, Chapter 30B, has 3 basic tiers. If you are spending under $10,000, you can use what's called best business practice. That is to deal with a supplier who has a reputation for a good quality product delivered with good service at a good price. And we are supposed to go out to the marketplace every so often and test that and make sure that we're doing that. Above $10,000 and below $50,000, we have to put together a small scope of work describing the project or the material that we're trying to buy and send that out to at least 3 providers. And above 50, we have to go to bid, prepare a full set of documents, and advertise that and wait for people to bid on the project. Now, that seems easy, but then comes construction and construction material. It does not follow the tiers in 30B exactly the same. It has different tiers that you have to follow. And in some cases, you can use Chapter 30 or you can use 39M. And as Adam said, when you're using Chapter 90 money, before you can go out to bid, we have to actually get a list of pre-qualified contractors from the state. So it sounds kind of straightforward, just follow the rules, but the rules are fairly complex. Now, the
Real estate disposition too.
real estate disposition is very particular, as is the sale of surplus property.
Yeah, you just did, yeah.
As well, which we just did. So these are very complex. The Office of the Inspector General does provide several training modules. You've completed two of those now? And so what do you have left?
Well, I actually have enough to have an associate MCPPO.
Right, but you have
just design and construction
design and
services. That's why when you brought up
construction
construction,
services,
I was like, I didn't quite take that one yet,
Yeah.
but we'll cover
and
it.
even design is even different.
Yeah.
If it's what we call horizontal road, it's not necessarily subject to procurement. If it's a building, vertical, it is. So I know the legislature has spent quite a bit of time developing all of this, and it can be rather complex. You've helped bring in a couple of grants for us. You worked with Rich Curtis. You want to talk to your work on that, on the snow and ice monies, and what we were working on this morning?
Yeah, that was a storm back in March of 2017, I believe, or 18, where there was a storm that took place, and our emergency management director, Rich Curtis, was working to put in the application to FEMA. I worked with Eric Arnold.
FEMA, you just did
Oh,
it.
FEMA, I did it again, okay.
You just did it. What is FEMA for those folks? I know many people will know, but
Yeah.
for those who don't, what is FEMA?
It's the Federal Emergency Management Agency. And then there's also in the state, MEMA, the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency. We have when in municipal management, we tend to come up with these terms and just get used to saying them, so I will explain it moving forward. Now with that, we met with the Federal Emergency Management Agency, Representative Eric Arnold. Rich Curtis submitted a lot of the materials, which made it easier for our office.
And he's our local director
He's
of
our
emergency
local
management.
Yep, and we were able to submit all the grant reimbursement grant materials with the. And keep in mind, a lot of these require a lot of paperwork. How many times do you sign for this one? 6, 7 times.
Many.
So a lot of the times, it's working with these agencies to make sure that you're doing everything that they want and the paperwork's coming in at the right times. There's the other one, the Community Compact grant that we received $30,000 for. The first one, the Shared Fire Services Study with Phillipston, the town of Templeton and Phillipston. And also another one we were awarded for another $30,000 for the Shared Accounting Services with Hubbardston. So it's important to note that a lot of work goes into this because there's so much paperwork that needs to be submitted. The contracts need to be signed, and the whole process needs to take its place. If I were to get into all the specifics, we'd probably be here for another 3-4 hours on all the detailed.
Well, we're going to cut off at 1 hour, no matter what we're doing.
But it's important to basically keep track of everything and make sure you're hitting those deadlines in time. There'll be another one opening up in August for IT with the state. So
Which is?
the computer
Information
technology, IT information technology, but this is more computers technology, that type of.
So let's talk about the Community Compact a little bit, because one of the things that we have to be very careful of is you could chase grants almost every day.
Yep.
So we have to be very careful to go after targeted grants that are helping us implement and follow up on the things we really had on our to-do list and that help the organization move forward. So the Community Compact is a program that Governor Baker, Lieutenant Governor Polito started shortly upon taking office, and it is a targeted system of grants to try to help local communities undertake studies, develop best practices that can help them better manage their local communities, look at regionalization and the like. So Adam got the first of these this year for us. It was for $30,000, as I recall. And it's for a study of the fire and emergency medical services here in Templeton and in Phillipston to determine which element of the departments, if any, perhaps might be suitable for a sharing arrangement. Administrative, record keeping, we already share a common dispatch center. Equipment. Each community sort of maintains the equipment that it needs. Is it possible to develop a equipment profile so that they have X and we have Y and we work more cooperatively together? That study just kicked off last week. We hired a firm, CGR. It's a nonprofit started by George Eastman in Rochester, New York. And we hope to have those results in time to have them to public meeting, public hearing by late this fall so that we can take them into an effort to look at the budget. Now, the other one you mentioned was for $30,000 as well, and that was for Hubbardston, our joint effort with Hubbardston. You want to talk about that one a little bit and how that has helped the two communities move forward?
Yes, with that, the chart of accounts with Hubbardston, the town administrator stopped by, and I also ran into one of the MMA conference as well, and chatted with both of us about some concerns that they have, not having not the same software as us, but able to do the accounting services like we provide here in Templeton. Kelly does a great job for us. We were fortunate. She's helped us get to where we are today. And Hubbardston didn't have those same services, and it was something that they were looking at to really clear up the issues that they have and to make that their budgeting process easier and more like ours when it comes to the chart of accounts. Because when they came in and showed us some of them, I mean, Kelly was working on it for a bit, and they were a little bit still. They're getting them together, but they're not quite where we are. So
yeah, the big thing is that Hubbardston is now purchasing its accounting services from the town of Templeton. We'll be talking more about that over the coming months. And in order for that to really happen, we needed to be using the same software.
they need to communicate.
And the state saw that as an important element of expanding regionalization. Most communities in western Massachusetts are simply too small to survive on their own. We have to provide all the same basic services, but we don't have the resources to do it. Another project that you were managing for us was the Stone Bridge. Stone Bridge failed in August of 19, and we got it so that it was not threatening the dike. There was no failure there, but we needed to study how to proceed. And Adam has been managing that project for us. How do you like working with engineers?
Sometimes it can be, well, them meeting deadlines could be, you have to stay on top of a lot of your contractors, if you will, and engineers, any kind of vendor, if you will. And it's a lot of legwork, a lot of chasing down documents, it seems, and making sure that everything gets submitted just how we laid out in the procurement process on or I should say after the procurement process when the contract's signed, to make sure that the contract's being adhered to and that our deliverables are being brought back to us. And I mean, Malone McBroom, I felt, did a pretty good job bringing the materials to us. Were they on time? A little bit delayed, but they nevertheless, they came in and gave us the options, and they gave us the alternative option as well.
So on that, we had a time schedule, and they missed their targets. We have another project. I actually, as you were taping a show with Luann, our assessor, a little bit earlier, talking with the engineer of, you missed your targets, how are we going to get this thing back on target? Did that surprise you? Has that surprised you at how much time you can spend managing your various contractors?
Yeah, because on top of all our normal day-to-day duties that we do, making sure that departments are looking through, making sure that they're spending on time. I mean, the spending is appropriate to the time of year. We have a lot of our time is spent really working on following up with the engineers, making sure that things are being submitted, and if they're not, if we're not hearing from them, that's usually the biggest sign is when you don't hear anything. That's when nothing is being sent via email. That's when a red flag shows up. I mean, at least pops up for me. And generally, I try to be a little proactive. Like a week before the deadline, I'll send an email. Sometimes 2 weeks before the deadline to make sure. But a lot of it is chasing things down, that I mentioned earlier, and really staying on top of the issues as they present themselves. But it's really identifying it before it becomes a common problem.
So Stonebridge, we're getting close. The selectmen expect on August 28th to make a decision as to which of several options they will proceed with, and then hopefully we can obtain a modest amount of monies at the fall town meeting to move us forward. Price tags range from the low $200,000 range up to $800,000, depending upon what we're trying to get accomplished. So it's not just been sitting in the office working on things. We've sent you out to meet with all the boards and commissions, and as we work towards the annual conference or meeting of all the boards, the all boards meeting, or however you want to refer to it. How has that been going? You've been exposed to quite a few boards and commissions here, and what do you think of your process there so far?
Well, I enjoyed it. Last night I went to the Conservation Commission meeting. I felt that they were a good group to chat with. It's one of the first boards I've served on when I first got involved with municipal government. I was appointed by the mayor when I was 18 to serve on the Conservation Commission, and I served 2 years there. And it's very important to, like, I'll just say Conservation Commission, for example, because they have a lot of authority with the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection and the local regulations pertaining to notice of intent or any kind of other wetland issues that like a buffer zone, and making sure that everything gets adhered to. But you also have the CPC committee, Community Preservation Committee. I went to probably about half of them so far. I've learned a lot from them, like the Open Space Committee meeting I went to. I learned that they submitted the open space plan to the state, and that there's progress being made there. I wasn't aware of that till I showed up to the meeting, and I learned something else new. Because we also have, on normal day-to-day operations, we have our own MS4 obligations. We have our own issues that come up on a daily.
So let's come back to the MS4 in a little bit, but I want to stay on the boards and commissions. So one of the tasks that Adam has been assigned is to go out and meet with all the boards and commissions so he can introduce himself, learn a little bit better what they do, and hear from them the challenges that they face. We want to try to make sure we're constantly working to improve communications from the select board to all those boards and commissions, between all those boards and commissions, so that no one is working at cross interests, or if their interests are different, how we can work to make them mutually inclusive as opposed to exclusive. One of the other things we want to try to sort out a way in which we can recognize our volunteers. We have a lot of great people who commit many hours of service to the community without compensation, simply because they love this community and have an interest in that particular field. So is that coming together well for you? Are you comfortable you're going to be able to deliver that report on time?
Oh, absolutely, and I'm getting a lot of positive feedback in regards to the volunteer recognition. I bring that up, and some boards talk about it more than others, but like at the Conservation Commission meeting last night, they talked about maybe when we're using our criteria to pick the volunteer of the year, to maybe perhaps look at reliability and length of service. So they're coming up with other suggestions, but I also, it's important to bring up that in Templeton, some people serve on multiple boards. So how we're going to really look at that is something that when I put my report together, I'll have the recommendations from what they feel, but then we'll have to come up with something that, as a tool that we're going to use moving forward to recognize volunteers, whether it be a plaque, whether it be perhaps having an award given at town meeting or annual town meeting or a special town meeting. We'll have those discussions.
Good. We did create a system to give special recognition to several of our employees once a year based upon some criteria. And we're looking to do the same for our volunteers. We truly could not manage local government without all of these people, from the Conservation Commission to the Planning Board, Zoning Board of Appeals, Community Preservation Committee, and it goes on and on and on. If you're interested in any one of those boards, give us a call, send in a volunteer to serve your town form, and we will do our very best to get you connected with that. If you're interested in economic development, something that is critical to the tax base for the community. At the end of the day, there's only a couple of ways to be able to deliver services without having to make constant cuts. And expansion of the tax base. I can remember driving up through Lowell one time, and the mayor of North Adams looking at the old, to show you my age, Wang building, saying how much he would love just to have one floor of that building in his city. Well, whether it's a 10,000 square foot building or a 100,000 square building, each commercial activity that causes new construction here in Templeton brings in new tax dollars and helps us either control that tax rate or deliver those new services. Now, the other thing that you've been working on is what we call embedding. It's not exactly to the extent that you'll often hear the term used in terms of when a newspaper reporter is on the front lines in a war zone or a peacekeeping zone where they spend months. But we have you doing something that we here locally are calling embedding. You want to talk to the folks about what you're trying to do there to learn more about these entities, the departments, the organization?
Sure. Lately, as many of you know, well, maybe actually you don't know, and that's why I will tell you, is I was out I go out with the various departments to understand what they do, to have a knowledge and expertise, not so much an expertise, but a general knowledge of what they do on their day-to-day operations. For example, I went out with Lori Wida the other day, our Development Services Director, to septic inspection for a resident. I was out with the inspections with Luann in the assessor's office and what they do. So these are just some of the embedding I'm working on. Should be in the accountant's office. I'm basically going to every single department. I already met with the fire chief. Going over there. I will have to get my CPR training done again. So.
Well, I'm looking forward to the day that you're
yeah, I know.
on Royalston Road.
Notice I didn't bring that up.
doing the paving. Bob and I are both waiting to see the cut of your coveralls and your work boots. But the idea is that if you're going to put out to bid bituminous concrete, it's helpful if you know what it is. If you're going to review a budget that has items, it's helpful that you know what they are. If you are helping the assessors get financing for their measure and list, which is required for the ongoing revaluations, it's helpful that you understand what is involved in that process. So about halfway through, do you think? A third?
I'll probably say a third there. I'm about halfway through the listening tour, but about a third of the way there with the embedding.
Okay, well, September 15th is coming on fast.
September 17th.
Off. Okay. Well, we got 2 days reprieve there. That's always good.
Yeah.
Good at the last moment. What would you say that you have found most interesting to you in working day to day? When you're on the city council, when you're on the school committee, your view of the organization is very different. It's much broader. There's some policies. You see 6 pages of a budget document perhaps as opposed to 400. What would you say you have found the most interesting of all the things that you've tackled here in your first few months with us?
I would say when I first came here, the most interesting thing I found was what you did with Chapter 43C on the merging of departments. Development services, how you put it under one umbrella, and you were allowed to under the statute, where it's different coming from a city because the city have all, the planning department, all these other various departments with personnel. Here it's all under the development services scope, which saved the town money, and we were still able to provide those necessary resources. So that was what I found interesting, was how you were able to use the statute, but yet save the town money, and those were things that had to be done for the betterment of the town. But at the same token, residents are still getting the same services.
We believe strongly in the communities that I've managed in the team concept. Many communities do work as a series of independent silos. There's not necessarily a lot of communication. They may talk, but it's not formalized. So in the communities that I've managed in the previous select board, felt strongly that team, having like functions in the same general physical area with a team leader where you can look at to make sure that the goals are being moved forward, and wherever they're at conflict, you're working to rationalize those and make them work best. What would you say you have found the most difficult part of being in the trenches here in Town Hall with us?
Bonds. Where you're
Don't like that financing part of that. So what have you found and why? What have you found and why?
The bonds are interesting. I mean, I have a general idea of how it works and everything, but the bonds I find where you have a very strong knowledge of that. I mean, we sat down with bond counsel. I've learned a lot through that, but it's really keeping track of them because having all that down properly in the budget is essential. And just the fact that missing one, scares, So it's really just attention to detail, but I would say that's probably the trickiest out of all, at least my experience so far.
So the community for capital projects can use debt, and often before you enter into permanent financing, you use what are called bond anticipation notes. And that's why you'll hear us talk about BANs, bond anticipation notes, quite a bit. And the projects require, under IRS rules, you can't just borrow the money at a tax-exempt rate, park it in a bank somewhere, and start earning interest. That's called arbitrage, and it's illegal. That is, well, I say it's illegal, but it's more about its structure. The IRS requires that you spend a certain amount of those monies in certain timelines. And if you aren't doing that, then you're in violation of the IRS rules. And there's actually a penalty that has to be paid. When the project is getting closer to being ready for permanent financing, that's called a general obligation bond. And you'll hear the select board talk about GOBs. It's Greek, it's foreign, sounds odd. GOB, general obligation bonds. And there are rules in the state statute about how long you can borrow for different kinds of projects. Mm-hmm. So keeping all of that straight, working with bond counsel, and there are rules of what you can do with any of the leftover monies. Very specific rules. And again, if you violate those rules, you can run afoul of either a statute or the Internal Revenue Service. So you found the most enjoyable part to be not quite what I would have anticipated. I would have thought it would have been Adam is quite a social, he's very good talking with people, working with people. He enjoys that. I'm a little bit more of the number cruncher. But constituent service is something we've asked you to spend a lot of time on. And how do you feel that works in small communities? We are the closest level of government to people.
Mm-hmm. My experience working working with people
Yeah,
and,
the
with
kinds of calls you've taken, the kinds of actions you've had to take.
I've had some interesting phone calls, but it's a matter of really sitting down and listening to the concern. And I really clearly articulating what department does this concern go to, and working with that department when they have, because we all have, with being on a town, we're all working on limited resources. So a lot of people can be overworked. So it's, for morale purposes, it's essential to work with the department head at the earliest convenience, but at the same token addressing the concern and prioritizing each single constituent inquiry, but getting it done in a way that's fair for the employees as well.
So you had a series of water complaints on one street. And unfortunately, the interests of some of our community not being flooded out was impacted by the interest of another member of our community dealing with the land the way they wanted to do. How did you deal with each of those? Those are competing interests that you have to try to bring together and harmonize.
Well, that was the one, the violation of our bylaw? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that one was resolved because it affected a public way and in violation of our bylaw, so we were able to forward over to town council the issue, and town council sent the owner a letter pertaining to the damage and that to our town property, and immediately it was addressed. And because it was addressed in a timely fashion, working in coordination with our DPW director, going out there, the other property wasn't being flooded, and it went back to, it turned out, believe it was a pipe that was clogged, which is causing
I was thinking of the forestry cutting as well.
When the forest, well, that was what we thought the initial issue was, but it actually turned out the drainage was what, because that's what made me, because when you're trying to figure out what the issue is and you just see a water, you kind of have to identify. So we saw a forest cutting plan, but it actually turned out to be a drain that was clogged.
So one of the things that we can't promise you on constituent complaints, concerns, is that we will always be able to bring it to a resolution that you like. It may not be possible, but one of the things that we can promise you is if you come into the office, send an email, myself or Adam or the department heads will fully explore what your concern is and do our best within the statutes, the local bylaws, the resources that we have available to try to address your issue. Now, sometimes, as Adam has just pointed out, I think rather nicely, we may have to spend a little bit of time really trying to get behind what's going on. We had a complaint about flooding. We went out, we looked at it, we thought it was issue A, but it turns out after talking more with people, it really wasn't, it was something else, and once we're able to identify that. What is your view of what's going on right now? We're going through some tough budget times with the school district under Prop 2.5. What's your assessment of that? How do you view that? Because you're coming out of a community where the school district is a single community district. It's a town department for all intents and purposes. That's not the case here. So I know that kind of took you a little while to get your head wrapped around. Mm-hmm. How would you describe this if you were having dinner with some friends and trying to explain the difference between a school department and a school district and how that impacts its members?
Well, because we're a regional school district and we're not a local school district, there's certain, like the Medicaid money, for example, goes to the regional school district, where in a municipality such as a city, they will go to the general, the budget per se, not to the school district. So let's say there's a deficit in the city of Chicopee, for example, and the mayor can say, okay, well, you have a $800,000 deficit. I'm willing to give you $400,000, but you got to cut $400,000. There's a little bit more control, or I want to say the town has a little bit more when it comes to a deficit per se, where we're kind of in a state where we're going back and forth with numbers and not quite agreeing to the number with the school district. And it gets frustrating, I mean, because we're getting so far into, I've never been down this 112th road before, so with the schools, and this is something that's new to me, but at the same token, I think we're going to find common ground eventually, and we'll get through this.
So that's the eternal optimism in there. The idea that the town side of the house and the school side of the house may reach common ground. I hope you're right. I'd like to think you will be right, but certainly that's going to be challenging. The school district has its needs and its obligations, and unfortunately, under Proposition 2.5, we're limited as to what we can do. So when the school district needs an increase of $1 million, but our new revenues are only $350,000. So what?
Straight math.
It becomes straight math. It becomes straight math. So the capital process, the town has been able to develop some healthy capital budgets lately, thanks to now getting free cash certified each year, and hopefully going forward, staying on track to do that. You sat on the capital planning process last year, and that was, can you remind me who was on that group last year?
Doug Morrison was the chair.
And he was from the selectmen. There's a
at the time,
selectmen's representative.
And then from advisory at the time was Mike Curry, who's now the chair of the select board.
Yeah.
And my Cheryl Richardson, our treasurer collector, and I was your designee at the meetings. I was ex officio, so I was only able to vote if they were short of a quorum. So I would serve to make sure that they had a quorum, and then I could vote. But if they did, all three showed up, then I would be sitting there and giving suggestions or ideas or whatever it may be.
Now, there are two citizen at large slots on that committee. It will be starting its work in earnest probably this coming October. If you have an interest in that, again, just give the office a call, send us an email, fill out the form and mail it in, and we'll do our best to get you on that. So what did you find most interesting about the Capital Committee, and what did you find most frustrating about not the committee itself, not the people,
we could back up to my
process.
We could back up to my tour of the DPW.
Sure.
When I first started here, I said, "Hey, we mind if I take a tour of the DPW?" Remember when I first, I think my first month here. And geez, coming from Chicopee, where we had like nice vac trucks, we had top of the line vehicles. I went down there, being my optimistic self, and I was kind of surprised to see how, the resources that the Department of Public Works was working with here in Templeton. And I think now that was when Mark Shea was here on an interim basis. I mean, we were fortunate enough to have Bob Sozik as our now permanent full-time DPW director, who has a lot of experience in the field. But the Capital Planning Committee, I was happy to help him get the resources he needs, whether it be a street sweeper. So the residents in town can see, oh wow, look at Templeton is out there, they're sweeping our streets, and they're actually picking up everything, as opposed to, the street sweeper constantly breaking down and being out of service. So those are basic services the Department of Public Works can provide you, but also there's other things like a hot box, for example. All these other items that were on the capital planning, that were submitted to capital planning from Bob Sozik from DPW, that were instrumental in giving his team, because they're down one highway person.
They are, and unfortunately, it appears that may be a cut for the full length of fiscal 2020. Absolutely,
and with that, I mean, that's why it's essential that we give them the tools that they need, from whether it be the truck so they could plow the roads, to the street sweeper that's going up and down the streets, where you're seeing all the dirt was sand, which we're changing. We're moving from sand to salt.
Full salt, yeah.
Full salt, so at least the catch basins won't be getting filled up, and we're going to be making progress on that end, and it won't be as dirty if from previous winters that folks in Templeton got used to. So it's really the Capital Planning Committee. I enjoyed being on that because it's great to be able to provide the resources your departments need with your limited budget or capital free cash was allocated towards capital items.
It has been challenging because for many years the town has worked on essentially what we would call a work to failure. The piece of equipment would just keep going and going and going until it died. And that can be okay in a private construction company or something else. But here we have public safety on the line. When the call comes in, we need the fire truck to roll. We need the ambulance to roll. We need the plow trucks during the height of the snowstorm. And we need the cruisers to get to the site of the accident or the emergency 911 call that's come in. So the cost of this equipment can be shocking. Six-wheel dump trucks.
Salt shed.
They can be $185,000 or more. A police cruiser today is on $45,000. The cost, very shocking, but we're working on trying to, now that we have certified free cash, and I would encourage the community to do anything and everything that it can to make sure it gets its free cash certified on time, it has its audits on time, it has its bond ratings on time. I know that the finance part can be some of the less interesting part of the job, but it really is critical, and I hope that you'll do everything that you can for the community to keep that online. So I want to talk about two more things. The first is you used an acronym earlier in the day. It's a project that you and Laurie Weta worked on with Bob Sosik. It's called the MS4. Would you like to explain what that is?
Well, the MS4 is the acronym used for it's basically the town needs to meet all the obligations in regards to water flow, stormwater, and everything else, because the EPA came down, and these are things that are another, I want to say, unfunded mandate that we have to comply with in regards to whether it be construction. It's really educating people at the same time. Fortunately enough for Templeton, the previous town administrator, Bob Markle, was actually put in the bylaws, which helped us when we filed our notice of intent, the bylaws that we needed in order to be in compliance. So I was ecstatic to see that those were done. So we were able to tell the EPA, look, we did this and this and this. That's why when we got the email from Bob, because I worked with Bob Sosik on it, and he submitted it to the EPA with Laurie Weta. We came back and we successfully completed the notice of intent. Some communities applied for a waiver. Some were granted it. Some, that's the process that needs to take place. But there's only a small part of Templeton that falls into this MS4, which makes the whole town fall into this.
So the EPA created a body of regulations on urban stormwater, catch basin cleaning, oil and grease separators, various steps that we have to do to make sure that our handling our stormwater, when all that rain hits hard pavement and goes rushing for those catch basins, goes rushing for rivers and streams, what are we doing to make sure that we have minimized its negative impact upon the streams, upon groundwater and the like? Now this hits primarily urban communities, and you wouldn't think of Templeton as being an urban community. But as Adam noted, it's just a small part of Templeton. It's East Templeton. In fact, at one time we joked and we said, if we could carve that off and give it to Gardner, would that mean we'd be out from underneath the regulations? And while we would be out from underneath the regulations. It's certainly nothing that we would want to do, but it means that we have a body of work we have to do for the entire community. These regulations cover all of Templeton, even though the urbanized area is just a small
But
part.
if I could also add too, we've been fortunate to have Fred Sivian from the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection that we're working closely with, who actually came in and told us, you know, when the deadline was approaching, hey, Templeton still hasn't filed their NOI, what's going on? Because keep in mind, if Templeton didn't file the NOI and just totally ignored the whole, I mean, we could have gotten serious trouble. I mean, we could have been going to and getting a decree issued against us. So these, I want the town to be aware, these are important, I want to say unfunded mandates that we need to do in order for us to stay under, so we could get that check mark from the EPA and then be in compliance without detrimentally hurting the town at the same time.
So Adam's been with us for coming up on 10 months now. In that time, he's made great progress in terms of learning local budgeting at the smaller community level. He's helped secure close to $80,000 in grant funds for us on a number of fronts. Been about halfway around, a third of the way around, meeting with all the volunteer boards and commissions. Helped us get the MS4 filed in time, and most importantly, helped circulate the request for letters of interest that the selectmen issued to try to attract cannabis industry to our community. In this case, we have one retailer that's interested in locating here and one that's interested in adaptively reusing the old Baldwinville Elementary School for growing, which has the possibility of bringing a substantial amount of impact fee and tax monies. So from my perspective, it's been going very well so far. And what are you going to do for the community when you are done here in 3 to 5 years? What are we going to say?
Maybe I'll stay longer.
Well, what will be the good things that you'll be doing that will want us to say, we want you to stay longer? What's your hope for?
I'm hoping
what
that,
are you hoping to be known for?
I'm hoping that I could make the town a better place budget-wise, bring in more revenues, as well as bring in more economic development. I mean, keep in mind we have limited amounts of time that we could spend on economic development. It's almost, think of it like a planning department. A planning department focuses on planning. I mean, obviously under their umbrella, economic development's there, but it's not the top priority. I want to try to bring that up a little bit higher and go out there. I mean, we have been proactive as a select board, instructed us to submit that RFI where we went out and sent it out and put it up on the web, and we were fortunate. We received 2, as Carter just mentioned, proposals with interest, strong interest in Templeton, and it's really looking at other industries. The cannabis industry is a new industry. Maybe look at breweries for the future. Maybe looking at other ideas or suggestions on industry that can come to Templeton. And that's why having the EDIC up and running is critical. I know we have 2 members there. I believe it's Glenn Eaton and Steve Castle that, you know, are very active. They serve on other boards for the town, or have served on other boards, and we need to get that up and running. And I want to have the town do better financially, but at the same token, I want people to have the utmost trust in their government moving forward, and that's critical to me.
So this has been a 1-hour conversation with Adam Lamontagne, who's our Municipal Management Fellow. He's been working truly in the trenches the last 10 months. We hope that the Select Board will be satisfied with his progress and move him up to be the Assistant Town Administrator in September. My pay and hours will go down. His pay will come up. And this is our succession plan. I hope you've enjoyed learning about him. He has a broad range of experience. Stop by, send him an email, catch him if you see him at any of the meetings. Learn more about him, what he's like, and what he hopes to do for your community. Thank you. Have a great day.